I am one of the practitioners, the lawyers who actually works in international public law. So I do work in tribunals and also in courts around the world dealing where there's been human rights violations. The only thing I would say is it does sadly take time. I have a case at the moment in the UK where my clients are all displaced Kosovans living in refugee barracks in Serbia. In fact, I'm just back from Serbia, and there's a case there in relation to the murders of their loved ones after the bombing of Kosovo in 1999. So 16 years later, they're in a court. The Bar Human Rights Committee works and stands with Iran and with Camp Liberty in relation to the violations and the atrocities that are committed. And we have written statements of concern, held events, and lobby as well alongside other human rights organizations for Iran. Now, thank you. President Rouhani said that the government will strive so that 50% of society in Iran does not remain unemployed, isolated, and Iran's second gender. That's what he said in April 2015. Astonishing, because Iran has continued to pass repressive legislation in relation to women. And part of its plan to promote virtue and prevent vice has resulted in very repressive legislation, which is contrary to international law. So in practice, what is happening in Iran is that there is a promotion of inequality for women, which is contrary to the protections and the rights under international law. So there is no doubt there. As a practitioner, what do you do about it? Well, it's all fairly obvious. The Constitution needs changing. You can't have a Constitution which is underpinned by regulations and legal structures which are rooted in medieval times. So that needs changing. Regulations need changing which are even more recent, such as those which restrict women being made judges. And they are as recent as the 1980s that they came in, and there they are sitting there restricting females as judges. So you need top to bottom in terms of change. What about the president? Well, the president under your regulations in Iran is elected from amongst religious and political men. That needs changing, and there's no reason why Iran can't make those changes, particularly when your president in Iran has said that's exactly what he's intending doing. So there's time there, and action needs to be taken. Camp Liberty, what needs to be done in relation to Camp Liberty? Well, there was a medical siege there, and also there was atrocious rocket attacks repeatedly, with the last ones being on the 29th of October of 2015, when 24 people were killed. And the silence from Iraq was deafening. Camp Liberty. This is where the UN really has to do something, rather than simply putting forward words. The UN needs to recognize Camp Liberty as a refugee camp. At present, it is like a detention center. That will then ensure that there are protections for those living within the camp. It's not a big step for the UN, because the UN Human Rights Council has already said that it considers the refugees there to be persons of concern. So legally, it's only a small step. The UK and other countries which are part of the National Security Council need to hold Iraq to account when these atrocities occur. and to stop them occurring again. And again, silence was deafening in relation to those recent murders that occurred at the end of last year. I'm going to leave you however, with something positive, because it wasn't that long ago that we were fighting against, and particularly with myself from a country with a terrible colonial history, fighting against this scourge of slavery on a very, very large scale. And I'm going to leave you simply with the words of one verse from Maya Angelou. She said, "Out of the huts of history's shame I rise. I'm a black ocean leaping and wide, welling and swelling. I bear in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into a daybreak that's wondrously clear, I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave. I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise." Shukran.